Oh, hello. Do you think that Big Brother is watching? Or that the Illuminati is planning to take over the world? Have you happened to have an encounter with a space alien today? Well, if the answer to those questions is yes, then grab your hat. This is tinfoil hat time. Welcome back to Tinfoil Hat Time. Today we're going to be talking about Big Brother is Selling You. Of course, we're familiar with the book 1984, where Big Brother is watching you is the big slogan. Well, this is Big Brother is Selling You. And I'm going to tell you, first and foremost, I am not necessarily anti-advertising. You see, the thing is that advertising is what lets the companies know that some new product is out there. And without any advertising or any marketing at all, we're kind of left ignorant about what exists. I want to know who has the new computers, who has all of the greatest whatever. I don't have an objection to that. But I think that advertising should kind of go back to kind of the ways before it was so narrowly targeted, where if I go and watch a video on, Linux per se, I might see things related to Linux being advertised. Well, anymore, you go to see a video and all that you get is a bunch of ads that seems to be related to the things that you've done search terms for. And this actually came up in a financial peace course I helped to teach on Monday nights. And one of the people, we were discussing the topic after the video section on buyer beware, about how the businesses, the companies, the marketers, they have a very, very sophisticated plan to separate you from your money and give it to them, which is many ways a fine thing to do, and we need to get out there as businesses and sell our products. I have some businesses myself. I need to sell my products. But what I don't want to do is be so narrow focused and so in your face that I can't get away from a company. And so one of the people in the class there had expressed the frustration. If you look something up online, you just, I kind of want to buy it. Okay, you decide not to buy it. But then for the next week, all she saw were ads to that. And I can relate, because back about 3 or 4, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was working on a website for an auto mechanic. And the auto mechanic was an AMSOIL salesperson. I think I've told this story before. Well, I had to go into AMSOIL to grab some information to put on the guy's website, and then all I saw for the next 2 weeks was AMSOIL ads. Okay, I don't care how good AMSOIL is. I will never use your products because you're just so in your face. So much so, I finally researched, how can I stop getting these ads delivered to me? And there's ways. You need to opt out. Of course, it means adding another cookie to your browser. So what I end up doing is I just started to use a Start Page as my search engine instead of Google. And then there's some other things I do, and I outline some of the steps. But really, the reason I wanted to write this article is related to the patent that Yahoo just submitted. And I want to say it was submitted October 6th, and it is for smart billboards. The title is Measuring User Engagement with Smart Billboards, and I have a link to it in the accompanying video, so you can check that out. Now, it's a 12-page document. I pulled out like 5 pages of really scary stuff. As I describe in my accompanying article here, this is kind of like Minority Report meets 1984. Of course, in 1984, you have the world where every little piece of your life is being watched, monitored, and at any given moment in time, the government in that world can switch on and be watching you, and you just never know if they are watching you, and that just kind of produces that little paranoia. Well, one person discussed a research study, where 10 families agreed to have pretty much everything in their life monitored. The only place it wasn't monitored with surveillance was the bathroom. And they found that by a couple weeks in, any private conversations were done out somewhere else or in the bathroom, which is just an unusual thing. Some of the families just opted out entirely. They're like, okay, this is just too weird. But that's what people say it becomes, is like all this mass surveillance around us all the time is kind of like being in a prison in a way. Well, we're not necessarily talking about government surveillance or things like that, but what I want to talk about is this ad surveillance and this really, really, really creepy marketing thing that Yahoo's trying to do. So, and by the way, if Yahoo didn't bring the patent, Google would have, or Microsoft would have. One of the other big players, actually I'd say, if not Yahoo, it would have been Microsoft. If not Microsoft, it would have been Google. Probably in that order, because Microsoft is really starting to try and prove to people how much data they have collected. But they're looser with the data. I recall one conversation, I think it was on a TED Talk, where the guy was doing some medical research trying to look at if a person was on one drug and then they were put on another drug, what were the correlating side effects? And they went to Google to say, hey, we want to do a search term for this. And Google's like, no, we don't think that's a useful, we think that'd be too invasive on our users' basis. So at least I can say that Google seems to have some scruples in releasing the data that they have. They don't just dish it out. Well, the guy was just literally at a dinner with some guy from Bing, and Bing's like, oh yeah, we'll give you anything that you want. It's just like, that scares me, Microsoft, especially with all of the data collection that Windows 10 is now doing. And it's not just Windows 10. If you're still on Windows 7 and Windows 8 and you're pushing updates, all of that information and data collection is backported to those other operating systems. So you're not safe if you just avoid Windows 10. You got to be careful with all the Microsoft products at this point. And they just seem to want to prove how much data they have, and they're loose with that data, and that's kind of the point. Now, some of the things that Yahoo says here, the most creepy thing is Section 24 here. In Section 24, they're talking about the nature of the real-time information. And they say here, such information might represent the size of the target audience, so the size of the audience, in various ways. That is traffic sensor data, image and video data, audio data, etc. It says it can be used to count or estimate the number of vehicles on the road, from which the size of the audience can be estimated. Image or video data can be used to identify the makes and models of particular vehicles in the vicinity. Mobile device data or image video data can be used to identify specific individuals in the target audience. Vehicle navigation and or tracking data can be used to identify specific vehicles and or drivers. Light sensors to measure the ambient light, temperature sensors for the temperatures, etc. So what they're basically saying here, and let me back up a step. I kind of jumped into that a little too quick. Let me tell you what they're doing here. Now, if you remember the movie Minority Report, Tom Cruise is walking down the street. He just has his eyes transplanted. Of course, your eyes are your main data. They basically have cameras everywhere that track who you are by looking at the biometric data in your eyeball. And so as he's walking down the street, he's getting billboards that are talking directly to him with his name, showing things that they think he wants to see. That's creepy. Now, that's not specifically what Yahoo's doing. Although they are looking at the individual people, it's very clear here. But they're not delivering those same types of ads. They're using a process that they call, and it's in quotes here, groupalization. Meaning that they're taking, instead of taking large aggregates of data, they're taking specific pieces of data and aggregating a subpopulation to deliver ads that they think will be even more relevant than just a general ad. So, in other words, the basic ads right now, you go like the ads at the beginning of this video or many other videos on YouTube, if you have not opted out and you're using Google a lot, you will likely see an ad that is related to something you've searched for or something that Google thinks is you want to see or is relevant to you. Now, if you're kind of like me and I make it hard for Google to track that down because of the variety of computers I use, the fact I use Start Page, the fact I clear cookies, I clear history in my browsers frequently, it makes it harder, and so I end up getting an ad that is relevant to the video I'm watching, which is actually my preference. Because if I'm watching a review on a graphic card and I see some advertising for a graphic card, it's very possible that I'm going to want to see other ads on other graphic cards so I can make the better choice. And I have clicked on ads that led to $1,000 sales from me. So I am not against ads at all. But what I'm against is so much targeting and narrowing down. And that brings you to what Yahoo is doing. So what they're doing is grabbing all of this data, and then they are cross-delivering it so much, feeding it back into the people so narrowed down to the demographic, to the income status, to the type of car, to everything so much that they think that that is going to be what causes the increase in the sales. And it might, but I think it's a dangerous thing. Now, before I talk about why I think it's a dangerous thing, let me go over here and read some of these scary quotes. Now, here's their overall abstract. It says that methods and apparatus are described by which advertising channels and public spaces are configured to deliver adaptive and targeted advertising in real time. So real-time contextual information is used to make determinations about the likely audience currently in position with view to advertising channel. In other words, they're mostly talking about digital billboards. Okay, so appropriate advertisements are then selected based on those determinations. Techniques for measuring user engagement with advertising is also described. So they're not just saying cars are coming down the road and the traffic's bad, let's put up a sign for a rest stop. They're saying, 5 different cars are coming down the road, all of which dictate that this is a middle class people in these cars, probably carpooling to work, and it's early in the morning at 8 a.m., so I'm going to push up Starbucks ads so they go for coffee. But the same road on the way back, the billboard maybe right next to it on the same ad network, now it's 5 o'clock, they're coming back, they're middle class guys, they're coming back over. Now the billboard, instead of Starbucks coffee to wake you up in the morning, now it's going to be delivering a Miller Lite or something like that. Just, some bar ad or whatever else. Now, you could do that and make those pretty good determinations without collecting all of this data. But they want to narrow it down even more. They want to get it so narrowed down so that they can change that ad when that new car approaches. And so the billboards you'd envision with their system are constantly changing based upon the grouping of data. Now, here's some of the scary stuff. So under the claims, they're saying the sensor data represent one or more vehicle traffic information near the location of this sign, a number of individuals in the audience, an image of viewing area for which the content is visible, so where can this thing be seen from, sound capture near the location, or biometric data representing one or more members of the audience. That's creepy to me, that they're going to start delivering ads based upon biometric data. I don't like that. I think that's a little creepy. Okay, so they're saying that there's a process, some processing in the sensor data that generates user data corresponding directly to individuals in the audience. That's number 7 from the claims. Now, I'm going to use this time right here. Actually, I'm going to read number 8, and then I'm going to use this time to talk about one of the major disadvantages I see with this from our socioeconomic and our betterness of mankind standpoint. So it says, we're in the processing sensor data to determine the level of user engagement with the content includes processing the user data to determine whether the audience corresponds to a target demographic. In other words, we are depicting various demographics based upon our various data input, and then we're going to deliver ads based on those target demographics. I have a simple question, and this is the same argument I have against, in my state, in Pennsylvania, we still have what some people call the weirdest liquor laws out there. Now, I don't drink, so I don't care. But basically, in Pennsylvania, you would traditionally need to go to a beer distributor to get beer. You need to go to a state-run wines and spirit shops to get anything like a liquors, wines, champagnes, anything like that. Well, there's been a big push to try and get it more like other states where you can go into the grocery store, you can go into the gas station, you can buy your alcohol, you can buy whatever you want to buy. And I think this is a major, major downfall, particularly for those people who are recovering alcoholics. If you are a recovering alcoholic, you're trying your hardest to get off of alcohol. The last thing you need is to go to the 2 places where we have modern necessities, gasoline and our groceries, and be bombarded not only with advertisements, but with the availability to buy alcohol. Well, you get the same thing. If I'm trying to quit drinking, or I'm not quite a drinker, but maybe I'm thinking about it, and you start pegging me as the target demographic because I'm nearing middle age and I have, X suggested potential income based upon my make and my model of my car, and you know what phone I have because you're even listening on my microphone. That's creepy. Now you start pushing me beer ads. Well, if I'm a recovering alcoholic, you have just caused a trigger for me that I now have to deal with. And on the flip side, you may have just pushed me over into a bad thing. Now, has the beer company succeeded in their goal of making a new customer? Yes. Well, they're leading to my downfall at the same time. And that's kind of one of these scenarios you can get into, and there's numerous other ones. Another one is the challenges and problems with having a demographic-based approach. What if are you going to start targeting, black people versus white people? And now you have your digitization is forming some basis of some form of preconceived racism based upon the demographic and user data, and that's bad. That's bad. As one person noted in a study that they found that Staples sold of all things staplers at different prices based upon the various location data. So in other words, if you'd go into one store, it'd be a cheaper price than if you go into another store. What they found is that the cheaper the price was related to the near proximity of a competitor. So if a competitor were nearby, the stapler would be cheaper. But what they found is that in communities where there was no competitor nearby were also poor communities, and poor communities, the stapler was more expensive. And so other things at the store were also more expensive. So if you were in a poorer community, it cost you more money to go shopping at your local Staples than if you lived in a wealthier community. And that's a problematic thing. But that's one of the things that they're looking at proposing to do in a way. Now, that's the sales of product is different than the marketing of the product. But here's a fun one from claim number 9. They're measuring things, whether any of the members of the audience slow or pause near the content could be indicated as a positive buying sign. And some people, I think this is only Europe, maybe in the United States, I'm not sure, but they're testing display glasses in supermarkets where, you walk down the aisle, you're looking for your ice cream, and you stop in front of the display glass and you're hunting for what you want to hunt for. Well, they're starting to put in biometric tracking data here to measure your eye and determine where is your eye looking in there and what is your facial expression and your mood, and they want to use that data to figure out how to better sell you more stuff. And that's a problem to me. But that's what they're doing here. Number 2, the number of the people in the audience they're collecting, the rate at which people in the audience pass by the content, 4, whether any members of the audience look at the content. So in other words, are you looking at it? Number 5, whether any members of the audience speaks one or more keywords relating to the content. I might just start swearing near these things. Maybe not. Claim number 15, they're actually considering the biometric data that will represent one or more members of the audience. This is kind of scary stuff. So under their main description, under point number 1, they're talking about the overall basis. And this is where I talked about earlier, how do the video advertisements get pushed up to you? And they're talking about what their system really is changing that demographic in a faster basis than it is being delivered to ad networks. So they write here, the ability to craft individualized marketing strategies to meet the needs of specific consumers have. Meet the needs and interests of specific consumers. You know what? My interest is to not do this. Do you have something in your plan for that? Kind of creepy. There's their groupalization. Oh, I have an entire line here marked. Let's see if there's anything quick here. Okay, this is just kind of just describing their billboard. The example of the billboard, if it's Monday morning, they're going to push coffee ads. If it's Monday night, they're going to be pushing, either football or bar ads, whatever. But then they're going to change some of those ads based on the socioeconomic status. If you're like a low-income car coming down, they're going to be delivering you an ad from Milwaukee's Best. And if you're a rich car, you might get the Guinness, If you search any of those terms, it's going to get worse. This is funny here. They're indicating where they're getting this information. So one or more cameras deployed near the digital billboards might capture images or video of vehicles on the highway, on the street, on aerial boards or on digital boards if visible, the cameras might be able to communicate directly with the digital boards via wired communication or wireless connection, or from a fixed location or an aerial drone. Big Brother is selling you something. Wear a hat, man. This is getting creepy. All right. I already talked about that scary paragraph. How's this one? I talk about this one a lot. Be warned about the mobile apps that you download to your phone, because here under item point 26, another example, image recognition techniques can be used to identify the makes and models and years of vehicles on the highway from which demographic information related to the socioeconomic status of the corresponding drivers can be made using, for example, previously stored marketing information. Such information could then be aggregated to represent all or at least a portion of the target audience. But in another example, cell tower data, mobile app location data, or image data can be used to identify specific individuals in the target audience, the demographic data for which can then be used to represent all or a portion of the target audience. Okay? So they're looking at specific vehicles, they're looking at specific vehicle owners, and they're looking at your location based upon mobile app location data. You realize that a lot of these mobile apps are made by people that their task isn't to deliver you a fun game, it's to collect your data. And read through the permissions that you are giving that app to use it. You'd find some interesting things. Of course, they are using sensors to determine the level of user engagement. Are you looking at the things, or are you just kind of walking by? I don't know. I might start getting fun with these things. Let's see. Anything else exciting? Yeah, one of the ways that they want to use these digital video processing data here is to determine whether any individuals looked at it by using either image recognition or eye tracking technologies. And that's kind of scary to me. They're even utilizing audio data captured by one or more microphones to utilize speech recognition in order to identify keywords. So, overall, this is pretty scary stuff to me. I think this is very much like kind of going a little too far with the data collection. They're collecting data from your phones, possibly from your camera on your phone, possibly from the microphone on your phone, definitely from the mobile app data. They said they were going to do that. Anything that you search for, the browsers that you're using, all of this kind of stuff is used to track this down. Get yourself a hat. So, is all hope lost? Well, not really. I identified 8 things here that we can potentially do. All right. So the things that I would recommend to do if you want to minimize the data collection on you, and you're not going to go off the grid completely, at least you won't be a good member of society if you do anyway. And I'm not completely saying completely vanish totally and completely. But it's going a little too far with what these companies are doing. When is there an end? When is there a time we can stop and say, I don't want this. Stop it. I don't want relevant ads. I want to opt out of your system. I never want you to collect things. I want all my data deleted. That is not possible. In fact, we are one of the only countries in the world where we do not have the right to examine what a private company has about us and demand that it be deleted. So what can we do? Well, I identified 8 things, and you can read a little bit more about these in my article. Number 1, and this was my first recommendation to our group at our financial class when they were complaining about looking something up and then seeing nothing but that ads. Google is not the only search engine. Stop using it so much. Now, there are times that Google is a very good engine. And on all my computers, Google is in the search mode. So what do I use Google for? Well, I use Google if, okay, come to think of it, I'm going to have more detail on the video than on the article, but read the article anyway. Okay. With Google, I like it if I can't find the relevant data I'm looking for, I'll look on Google because it delivers good things. If I'm looking for the weather somewhere, it's easiest to use Google because, weather, dictionaries, also reverse phone number checks to make sure, if a phone number calls you, I usually Google phone numbers. You can't do those on Start Page. They don't have the technology that tracks and looks at the phone number. But if you type in a phone number with the format properly, then Google will tell you real quick, is that a phone number established with a business? Is it on a scam list? What is it? If you type in weather information, Google gives you the weather information. Type in a word, like a word and definition, it gives you the definition, so I don't have to dig a whole lot deeper. Those are very, very good, useful things. Google is not a bad engine, and like I said, they're a little bit more cautious with just dishing out the information, but they are still a company that has all this information, so we have to be cautious. So I use Start Page. Other people recommend like DuckDuckGo, which I've tried DuckDuckGo. I hate it. There's just something about it. I don't know what it is, but I hate DuckDuckGo. It's just something about how the results are delivered back to you. To me, it just looks like one garbled mess. But I use Start Page or IXQuick. I find those to be very good search engines to look things up. So that's actually what I use on the default on all my Firefox browsers. Number 2 is you opt out of all of the data collection that you possibly can. Now, unfortunately, this is kind of more like a gimmick than anything, because to opt out of all these people's data collection, what it means is they're storing yet another cookie on your device. Well, the cookies were the initial problem to begin with. There's 2 main ways they're going to collect a bunch of data. Number 1 is through tracking pixels, and number 2 is through the cookies. And the cookies is more of the classic way. The tracking pixels kind of started to catch on, I don't know, 5 or so years ago. I started to see a lot of requests to put tracking pixels and things. You can generally block the tracking pixels, like Facebook has a huge tracking pixel market right now. You can block those by blocking the main domain URL in the hosts file. And I provide a link for that in the article, like just how to edit the host file. You can do it very easy on all 3 major platforms. Unfortunately, the host file is not available to edit on an iOS device or an Android device unless you root/jailbreak it. But that is one of the ways you can do. You can opt out of all the information. I do give information there on opting out of the ads, the analytics ads, Google personalized ads, and Microsoft personal ads. Shocking, Yahoo didn't seem to have one. They had a little help article on opting out of data, but it didn't have any information on my page, maybe because I had an ad blocker on the browser I looked at. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Number 3, use a variety of web browsers, even on mobile, and clear your cookies regularly. All right, so this is a fun little task. Install all of the web browsers you can possibly install on any of the computers that you have. Very handy thing. So on this computer here, I'm looking down, I have Firefox, Chromium, and Opera, and I'm recording this on a Linux Mint computer. On the new Linux Mint computer I installed, I have Firefox and Chromium. I think my Ubuntu computer, I have Firefox, Chromium, the basic generic browser. I might have Opera, and actually I have Chrome on there too, because I want to test some applications on Chrome. Most of my computers, I have at least 3 browsers on. Now, if you are looking at something in one browser and you want to see if you get a different result, in fact, this is a fun thing. I challenged a friend to do this once. Go into one browser, turn on all the cookies and all the tracking and all the stuff, turn on one browser like Firefox and look up all conservative things, and then go into your Chrome browser and look up all liberal things, and do that for a month. And then just keep on going on to Google, type in the same search end terms after about a month or 2, and you're going to get 2 totally different pages of results. Because they're tracking all the data, they're tracking everything down, but each browser operates as a totally separate entity. That's kind of how the way private browsing works. Each one of the browsers now has a private browsing module. When you click on the private browsing module, it just separates it from the original. Although there's some things that carry over from the private browsing to the private browsing, so it's not a perfect situation. So what you do, though, is if you take if you do the Firefox on the one computer and the Chrome on the one computer, like the same computer, 2 different browsers, you can get 2 completely different results going back and forth if you do that. But switching browsers around, you can start confusing the tracker guys, and then just clear your cookies regularly. I'd rather clear the cookies and leave on the the turning off private browsing, then allow the cookies to go and have them collect all the data. Because if by turning those systems on, they very well still may be tracking all the data. They're just not delivering it to you yet. All right. Number 4, consider using Tor particularly for like basic web browsing. So if you're using, you don't want to use Tor if you're doing something real, like, if I go to the same 5 sites every single day, I'm always checking out the news, I'm always checking this out. I go to my bank statements, I go to credit card statements, whatever. No matter what you're doing on all of these things, you don't need to use Tor for that kind of stuff. But if you're going to be you're like, okay, I need to sit down and research something on the web. Tor would be a great thing to do because it totally keeps it so anonymized that usually they're like, Tor is so that people can't see what you're doing. I like Tor because the companies can't see what I'm doing. I'm more concerned about the companies than anything else. So consider using Tor just for some basic web browsing stuff, although not everything. Number 5, of course, welcome to switch to Linux. Switch to Linux. Use Linux. Both Windows and the Mac platforms are engaged in a lot of data tracking. Now, Mac, I have found, just based upon looking at my router logs, I found when I go to my Mac and I turn off the privacy settings, my Mac really doesn't talk much. Windows 10, I can turn off all the privacy settings, and there's still 45, 50 connections made all over the world on my Windows 10 computer. It's like, I turned off all the privacy, I blocked 100 sites in the host file, and you're still making all these connections to the outside world. Because Windows does not respect your request to not do privacy. If you want to stick with one of the 2 mainstream operating systems, go with Apple. But don't use Safari because you can't change your search engines, you can't opt out of all the cookie stuff. I really just don't like the Safari part of Apple just because of how locked down the stupid thing is. But as far as operating systems itself, Mac does not track you nearly as much as Windows does if you tell it do not track and do not use an iTunes account or iAccount, whatever they call them over there. I don't know because I don't have one. But Windows 10 isn't just the problem either. If you're still in Windows 7 or Windows 8 and you're updating your computer so it doesn't get like massively data hacked, they're backporting all of that same telemetry stuff, so you're still getting spied on by Windows if you're still on those. So using Linux will prevent that. Now, you do have to watch out with the software you're using because the operating system itself can send data back, but it's the software you also have to watch out for as well. So sticking with open source free software on Linux is the better way to go. You might find yourself like, unfortunately, I'm really waiting for a mainstream alternative to Skype. There's a couple out there, but pretty much every contact I know is on Skype, so I unfortunately still use Skype. Nope, I don't trust it. It's a Microsoft product. Number 6, never give more data than you have to give. Go check out that link I put in there. Because I referenced the article from 2014, I think, where I thought it was a student, but I think the article said it was, I don't know, investigator or something. I forget who it was. But they were offering cookies in exchange for filling out a form, which contained a whole lot of private data. And this person collected photographs, fingerprints, social security numbers, your mother's maiden name, reviewed driver's licenses, all for a cookie. A cookie! Go bake a cookie. Don't give out your social security number for a cookie. Crying out loud. Now, of course, they said, maybe some people lied about it. I don't know. But never give more data than you have to give. Stop and consider the source. If you're going online, then you want to read some article, and they're like, sign up here. Someone else probably has another copy of an article that's very similar. I don't think you're missing a whole lot. Now, obviously, if you're doing banking, stuff like that, you need to use real information, scary as it is. All right. Number 7, be cautious of permissions in the downloaded apps. Do we need to say this more? Do not just go out there, download an app, go, that looks cool, just download it. Many of these developers are merely data farmers. They're not here to deliver you an awesome app. They're here to collect your data. Because if you look at your permissions, you'll see some things. And I noticed this I noticed this there's two major Bible apps. One of those is YouVersion from Church TV, and one of those is Bible Gateway from Bible Gateway. One of those, I forget which one's which, requires way more permissions than it probably should. And actually, as a result, I did not download the app onto my phone. Because you do not need to have access to my contacts to show me the Bible. Period. Period. And you, of all people, should get your butt in gear. Watch out for permissions. Number 8, if you do not pay for a cool new service, you are the product. That's an old adage, but it's a true one. If you have this fancy, cool, awesome new service out there that's all free to sign up for, you are the product. Data is likely being connected. Now, there may be some small startups that just don't have all that figured out yet. I'm not saying it's an absolute 100% completely, totally never work with any group out there. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is you have to be very careful of utilizing free services, because especially the bigger free services, it's all a ploy to gather more information about you. Whether they put a cookie on your computer that tracks all the other sites, they collect this data and sell it. You never know what's going on behind the scenes. So overall, I gotta say, this is some scary stuff. Smart billboards utilizing aggregate data to change their advertising messages based on the actual individuals that is approaching, that's a scary proposition. That's a proposition that it makes me kind of want to go live in a cave somewhere. That's kind of crazy. At least I have that redeeming value that I'm trying not to just spill my data out all over the place. But at the same time, there's really nothing you can do completely to prevent that. And obviously, if I were so against it, I wouldn't be putting videos on YouTube. But I am, because it's a useful platform. And I don't mind the fact that they're going to collect some data. But let me tell you some of the things that I do to prevent Google from collecting a lot of data is on everything where I have logged in on my channels, where I check my channels out, I don't actually watch other videos on it. I watch all the videos on other places where I don't have cookies enabled, and at least not cookies stored for long periods of time. I use an alternative browser that I otherwise would not use. Those stay logged in so I can do my YouTube stuff over there. But then I use the alternative browsers for any of the actual YouTube video watching that I'm doing. And then not that I won't go on logged into the account, if I want to comment or subscribe to something or whatever else, I'll do that. But I want to have a little bit more control. And so I'm separating the level of data out in that respect. So we do have to be careful. Big Brother is selling you. They're selling you. They have a giant plan to separate you from your money. Maybe you're looking for the service. Maybe they're just breeding discontent. Whatever the case, be careful. Big Brother is selling you. Get a hat. This has been Tom with Tinfoil Hat Time.